There is an ancient story of a student who went to the master and said, I pray, I study, I meditate, do my daily rituals, and I even fast a little. I live in peace with others. Teacher, what more can I do? The master rose, lifted his hands, and stretched his fingers out towards the heavens, when suddenly they became like 10 lamps of fire. And then he said, You can become all flame. Welcome, I am Jareth Tempest, mystic, magician, psychonaut, astronaut, hierophant, all-around seeker of truth, author, full-time weirdo, and host of this show, where we talk about mysticism, the mystical journey, and all that's magical in the universe. Everything from spirits to spirituality, while I take you on a magical mystery tour through the inner worlds, and hopefully inspire you to take the next step so that you can become all flame. Okay, well, thanks for being here this week. I've had quite the fun week. I went and caught COVID. We've, 3 years into this pandemic, and I haven't had it, and I finally had to go get it. So yeah, I'm probably going to keep this a little short since I don't want to overwork my voice, and and I'm mainly I'm doing a lot better. I'm just mainly tired, and I don't want to have to spend a lot of time trying to edit this or anything. So, and I'm sure that there's going to be lots of coughs and throat clearing and stuff to have to edit out. So I didn't really know what to talk about this week, so I just kind of posted in the group, hey, what do you guys want to hear about? And most questions were about attunements and how I create them and stuff. I don't really want to talk about how I create the attunements, but I did have a few other interesting suggestions and things that I might talk about later, since they are interesting topics and will probably take longer to explain. Things about like, what's the difference between Kabbalah with a K and Kabbalah with a Q, and how can we know which one is which? And then someone else wanted to know kind of what's the difference between Kabbalah and Enochian, and or how those two work together, as well as people just expressing more interest in my take on Enochian. So all of those are really good questions, and some of the other ones that people ask as well, but they will take a lot longer to talk about. So what I decided to go with, someone asked, like, basically, they were asking specifically with attunements, but I think it's a good question that we can talk about. It's like, how do you communicate with spirits? So I think that this will be really helpful for people, and I can probably get the gist of it out a lot quicker. So win-win. All right. So the first thing you want to do when you're, doing any kind of communication, of course, is a ritual to make sure you're talking to the spirit that you are trying to talk to. And the main way you do this is by using their sigil or their name, or really their function. If you know their function, then you don't even really need a name. That's kind of how Josephine McCarthy works, is she just works with their function and doesn't worry about trying to get the name, because at that point you don't need the name, you just have the function. But either way, you need something to kind of guide you to that right spirit. And obviously that's what a lot of occult books and stuff are. They're the names of spirits with their sigils or other ways of contacting them, and then telling you what that spirit can do for you. And so you follow the ritual however it is, be it using a sigil and a name. And that's really, people overcomplicate things so much, but really to do an evocation, all you need is a sigil and a name. You just stare at the sigil and say the name and call on that spirit until it communicates with you. All the other stuff we do to add these things is just things to make that work better. But that's strictly all you need. If you have a sigil and a name, you can make it work. How do you communicate? Well, a handful of people in the world who are really, I guess, lucky, can just hear spirits, and that's awesome for them. I'm going to assume that if you're asking this question, that you don't have clairaudience, or or at least you don't have a really strong case of it where you can just hear them. And you might be confused, especially as a beginner, of like how this works. So the main thing to always remember is that it's, you're going to hear it as a voice in your head, and more often than not, it's going to sound like your voice. And so right away, your question is going to be, how do I hear? I mean, how can I know if it's the spirit or if it's me doing that? If I'm answering my own question or something. Well, this is where the age-old phrase, know thyself, comes into play. Because the more you know yourself, and the more that you know the different voices in your head, and you know how you would answer those questions, then the more you're going to know. If you're doing it yourself, you're going to be like, oh, well, that's that's definitely my voice. That's definitely my answer to that question. But if you're getting an answer that's unexpected, then that's a really good sign that it's not coming from you. And sometimes and this is the thing. It's like, clairaudience is actually supposed to be one of the least trustworthy methods of communicating. And so you want to test everything, and you always want to make sure that it isn't coming, it could be coming from you. It could also be coming from another spirit. It can be coming from like a trickster spirit or a parasite or something. And so you just, you never really, you take everything at some kind of face value, but you always want to like have that. It's good to be a little my mind went blank, I can't think of the word, but be critical of anything that you have, and just don't accept it blindly. On the other hand, you want to trust your intuition, and when you get an answer, you don't want to sit there on and just, whittle it to death until you don't believe you have an answer anymore. So it's a balance between the two. And I guess a lot of it depends on what you're asking the question, for. What are you trying to get? And what answer are you getting? If it's something extreme, like, you should leave your family and go, off to some other country, well, you might want to stop and think about that one and don't trust it right away. Maybe get a second or third opinion from other spirits or something, or get more information or explanation from that spirit. If it's just something, more, just kind of for your own good for the moment or something like that, that's not as important as the point, then you trust your intuition a little bit more. That being said, my friend that's a card reader and clairvoyant and everything, Ani Eden, she says that the biggest thing you can do when doing any of this kind of work is just trust your intuition, trust yourself that you're getting the right answer. So there are some things that you can do to help this practice. And so there's a book, and this is not a magical book. It's a writing book called Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. And I've mentioned this before. I love this book. And it's entirely about writing practice. And her whole point is that you just write, you set a time limit. You're like, I'm going to write for 10 minutes. And then you put pen to paper and you just write for 10 minutes solid without stopping to think. You just write what she calls first thoughts, because those first thoughts are going to have all the energy and the life before your editor can come in and tell you, oh, don't say that, that's too weird, or anything. You're just getting those first thoughts out. And so this is how I learned to write, was by writing in this style. So I kind of already had a head start when coming to talk to spirits, was because I just kind of took that same concept and ran with it. And the more I read from other practitioners and stuff, it kind of rang true to end up being what a lot of them were doing as well. And that is, that first answer you get when you ask a question, sometimes it happens before you even finish asking the question, or almost as soon as you think about asking the question, you'll have an answer. And you need to trust that answer. And it does help to write it down. And, that's almost automatic writing as far as I'm concerned. A certain kind of automatic writing. There's not the kind where it takes your hand and you're using, that kind of, it's not that kind of automatic writing, but it's at least the kind where you just write those first thoughts out. Boom, boom. Just don't stop, don't think, definitely don't edit. Just write. And those will be your best answers. That's more than likely going to be where the spirit talks to you, is in that very first blast of information that you get whenever you ask that question. And something else to think about is if you aren't, like if you're doing a path working especially or something, or any vocation, whatever. And I meant to bring this up when I was talking about path working. It's okay to use your imagination to get things going. You do your path working, get to that final image, and you call the spirit's name. You may or may not feel something, but what you can always do is like imagine a humanoid shape appear. Now you don't have to give it a way of looking or anything. Just give it a humanoid ghostly shape or something, and then your imagination might suddenly give it a specific appearance. Well, that's your mind then taking that cue, and it's translating that energy that it's getting into an image. Is that how the spirit really looks? Well, no. It's your version of that spirit and how that spirit works. It's the frame that you're going to work with. And it can change from ritual to ritual. Raziel had a particular look when I first started working with her that has evolved over the years, and that's just the way it happens. And then some of the ways that spirits, it's obviously this is not what the spirit is really looks like. It's a very personal, idiosyncratic type look. The like Lucifer often appears to me in like a white, kind of an 80s looking white business suit with shoulder pads and stuff. It's like it's very reminiscent of the way the Joker was drawn in The Dark Knight Returns, only without the Joker smile and everything, just kind of like in this, big white suit with big shoulders. It's stuff like that. Do I think that that's the way Lucifer really looks? No, but that's for whatever reason, that's the way my mind is translating that energy. And a lot of this will also have to do with how much you're in depth with a certain symbol set. Like if you work with, use the Golden Dawn as an example. If you really have worked with the Golden Dawn and their imagery and their symbols and their version of the tarot and all of that, then you're going to then things will start to appear to you using those symbols, and that'll be the way that your imagination is portraying these things. But if you're much more familiar, if you've spent way more of your time playing video games, then these things are going to start looking more like video game characters. And they might even use some of the symbolism that you have from a video game. Now, that doesn't mean that the video game creators intentionally put that in there and that they're secret occultists. What it means is that your mind is just simply using those symbols to translate that energy into something that you will understand. And I'm using video games as an example, but it can be movies, and it can be comic books, or it can be classic literature. It can, whatever it is that you spend the most time with that has kind of forged your imagination, the way the imagery and that your subconscious works with. What is it? that your unconscious is what are you feeding your unconscious more than anything else, and that's very well may be the way that these spirits will appear to you. And so if you watch a lot of horror movies, they're going to maybe look like some of the figures in horror movies. That doesn't mean that they're really scary. It just means that that's what your brain's full of. And so I'm not going to tell you that, hey, you need to be careful what you fill your brain with, but you need to be aware. You need to be very aware of what you fill your brain with so that you at least understand the unconscious language that will be used anytime you do any kind of spirit work. It's all going to be working out of your subconscious. So yeah, just, this is, again, you got to know yourself. You got to understand how you think and what you think, and the more that you know that, then the more you're going to be able to know when something's from outside of you that's working through you, and you'll also have a much better understanding of your own unconscious language and symbols and stuff like that. So that's all important as a magician. So much of this is really just going through it's your internal worlds, and so but one of the key words there is you and your, and people tend to forget that, and they expect everything to look the way Crowley explained it. Well, that was his internal world and his way of his interpretation of certain symbols and stuff. So you just, it's fine. And again, you just need to be aware of it. That's the most important thing. And again, you go with those first thoughts, that ask your question, and bam, you just get that answer. And you can, if you're writing it, write it down right then, or try to remember just those very first thoughts. Again, as you're asking the question, or you might get an answer before you're done asking, or as soon as you even think to ask the question, you already know the answer. That's them. Yeah, and then you should always kind of look at it after the fact, and then try to make sense of it, and try to figure out what if there is any kind of symbolic meaning to something, or what the larger implications might be, and whether or not you are willing to, because you don't have to do whatever a spirit tells you to do. You don't have to take their advice. You have a rational mind. You should still use that. Yeah, that's really the key element to spirit communication. And I think that it doesn't matter if you're using an attunement or a ritual, it still works the same. You're with an attunement, you're just calling on the energy instead of doing a more formal ritual, but you're still just listening for those first thoughts. It doesn't change very much. Sometimes it makes it easier. Sometimes it doesn't. It's just, it's how you resonate with that spirit. But most people kind of, get a little bit better reception after an attunement. So yeah, that's kind of the main thing I think I wanted to talk about today, and at least get something out to you. I really hope that this helps. I mean, I know I've said most of this before, I think with the Holy Guardian Angel episode, but it bears repeating because it's not just the Holy Guardian Angel. This is for any spirit that you work with. You go with those first thoughts, and you really, again, you need to really just be aware of, just know yourself, and spend time with yourself, with your own mind. I'm not an expert in this, but there's a practice that you can do called active imagination that I think Carl Jung, it was a big part of his practice, and I've kind of been looking a little of I was watching a video about his runes and stuff, and what those, man, it kind of comes from the black books, and it's just freaky. It's just the weirdest stuff. Like he thinks it all comes from his mind, but it's like, no, man, that's not that there's some spirit work happening here too. That's pretty crazy. So what you do though, I mean, it's really very easy. You clear your mind. Just imagine like a blank white space, and then just let your imagination fill in a setting, and then start imagining yourself exploring that setting. And if you come to see any people or creatures, talk to them and use these first thoughts and just let them, or just, and if you're imagining somebody there, just let them be real. And don't worry if it's coming from you or if it's not. Just let it flow. I mean, sure, it's coming from you, but that doesn't necessarily mean it isn't more than that. And the more that you explore your inner world in this way, the more that this particular place will become more and more real. And so what you do is, try to do it for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then when you're done, you can write it down, or maybe you can record it like your dictation as you're doing it, or something like that. But then when you come to do it again, just pick up exactly where you left off and just keep going. And just keep doing that, and see, you're going to discover you have entire worlds within you, and the different people and creatures and characters and stuff that you meet in that inner world are going to have, just a tremendous, vast amount of wisdom. And, you can believe, like Jung did, that, these are all just his, unconscious mind speaking to him in the different parts of his unconscious mind. Or, you might be more of a magician and imagine, think that, hey, okay, this is obviously tapping into something else, and my higher self and other various aspects of my spirit group and stuff are here, talking to me through this stuff. And you'll find names and stuff that are, they're probably your names for all of these different characters and stuff. But this is what it's all about, is finding out who you are, and all of the, there's a universe within you, and this is how you start to explore it. So yeah, give that a shot. And I'm going to go ahead and close this out so I can start getting into edited and have it ready for you later, or for tomorrow. Hopefully next week I will be feeling better and can get, more on top of some of these other questions that people have. All right. Well, again, and thank everyone for any healing or good thoughts or prayers or anything that you sent me. I really appreciate it. We are doing, much better. We're just kind of, we're over the sickness part. Now we're just kind of recovering. So yeah, we're doing good. And I really appreciate everyone's love. And I will see you next week. Bye-bye.